Today, we're diving straight into the newly signed U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding. This is an absolutely crucial document that aims to hit pause on a devastating global conflict that's had, well, pretty much the entire world on edge. We're going to walk through exactly what's actually in this text, the massive financial controversy surrounding it, and the very real, on-the-ground hurdles it's facing right now.
Here's our roadmap. We're going to quickly hit Section 1, the War and Peace deal timeline. Then Section 2, the terms inside the initial agreement. Section 3 covers the economic pressure at the Strait of Hormuz. After that, we'll tackle the $300 billion question in Section 4, unresolved regional pushback in Section 5, and finally, the 60-day countdown that's basically holding this entire fragile truce together. Let's just jump right in.
Section 1, the War and Peace deal. We really have to start by looking at just how incredibly fast this conflict escalated before coming to a sudden halt at the Palace of Versailles. It is wild how fast things moved here. The conflict officially launched on February 28th, kicking off with the U.S. and Israel carrying out the assassination of Iran's supreme leader and top military officials. What followed was a massive escalation. We're talking huge global energy price spikes and renewed fears of global inflation. But then, literally just months later, during a state dinner at the G7 summit in France, U.S. President Donald Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian actually signed an initial agreement. President Trump noted he wanted to avert a, quote, worldwide depression, pointing out a clear pattern. Every time peace was mentioned, the stock market shot up, and whenever talks looked negative, it dropped significantly.
Moving on to Section 2, inside the initial agreement. The big question here is, what did both sides actually trade to get the fighting to stop?
At the very heart of this document, we see a classic quid pro quo. On the U.S. side, the massive concession is terminating all types of sanctions on Iran. In exchange, Tehran's primary concession is officially reaffirming that it will not procure or develop nuclear weapons. And remember, going into this conflict, that was the absolute #1 condition for the U.S. Now, I want you to notice a very specific diplomatic term they used here, downblended. This means diluting enriched uranium right there on site under the careful watch of the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog. And this is a huge policy shift. Originally, the US fiercely demanded that every single ounce of nuclear material be completely removed from Iran. Agreeing to on-site downblending instead is a massive compromise, and it's basically the cornerstone of how they even reached this truce. All right, Section 3, the Strait of Hormuz. Let's talk economics, because this is exactly what's been sending global markets into an absolute panic. This waterway is a literal choke point for the global economy. To put it into perspective, a full 20%, 1/5 of the entire world's oil and liquefied natural gas has to squeeze through this single narrow strait. So, when Iran effectively closed it during the conflict, the shockwaves through the global supply chain were immediate. Under this new agreement, there won't be any charges for ships passing through for the next 60 days, which acts as a huge, albeit temporary, relief valve for global trade. But here's the thing, the market is still incredibly anxious. Even with the ink dry on the agreement, and despite a tiny 1% dip in early trading right after the announcement, Brent crude oil is still carrying an $8 premium per barrel compared to where it was before the war started on February 28th. That $8, that is the global market hesitating. They are literally pricing in the very real risk that this peace deal just might not hold. Which brings us to Section 4, the $300 billion question. And man, that market anxiety leads us straight into the most politically explosive part of this entire text. We're talking about a $300 billion plan for Iran's reconstruction. And as you can imagine, this astronomical sum immediately sparked fierce bipartisan backlash in Washington. Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who is a well-known Iran hawk, did not hold back. He flatly stated that giving billions to those who want to murder Americans is, quote, not a good idea. He wasn't alone either. Senator Bill Cassidy, another Republican, went as far as calling the deal the worst foreign policy blunder in decades. The pushback from lawmakers was absolutely intense from day one. Now, pushing back hard against that criticism, President Trump called reports of the U.S. giving Iran money a fake story. His argument is that the U.S. isn't paying a single cent of taxpayer money. Instead, it's Iranian assets that were frozen during the war being returned. U.S. officials even tossed out a hypothetical example saying, if Iran behaves, countries like the UAE could step in and build a power plant in Iran with the U.S.'s blessing. So the entire debate right now is hinging on one question. Does unfreezing these assets count as funding a former adversary? Section 5, Unresolved Regional Pushback. Because despite the handshakes and the photo ops in France, the reality on the ground in the Middle East is incredibly messy.
The memo is super clear on paper. Point 1 demands the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. It's a massive, sweeping statement. But right now, that exact provision is facing intense, on-the-ground resistance that could tear the whole agreement to shreds.
Geopolitically, things are precarious to say the least. Israel has flat out said it has no plans to pull its troops out of Lebanon, and they actually kept launching attacks on Hezbollah right as the deal was being finalized. This led President Trump to caution Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the G7. He suggested that while Netanyahu is a good man, he needs to use a softer touch so he doesn't upend the Iran deal entirely. And the criticism is coming from the left too. Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen called it a very bad deal, warning that it completely ignores Iran's support for regional proxies like Hezbollah and totally glosses over their ballistic missile program.
Section 6, the 60-day countdown. All of this friction, it all brings us right up against a ticking clock that's built straight into the memo.
The threat of time running out is incredibly real. Iran's parliamentary speaker and key negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, went on Iranian state TV and made it crystal clear that their distrust of the U.S. runs deep. He warned that Iran's, quote, finger is on the trigger, and heavily implied that the Strait of Hormuz won't just magically return to pre-war conditions, hinting they might start charging ships the second this initial deal lapses. It's a very stark reminder that both sides are fully prepared to start fighting again. So what's the actual path forward? It's basically a highly fragile three-step process. Step 1, just try to survive this initial 60-day window where hostilities are paused and sanctions are lifted. Step 2, navigate what are guaranteed to be intensely difficult negotiations over the nuclear program, a phase the text notes is extendable if both sides agree. And step 3, somehow forge a final, permanent deal before all of this trust evaporates. And the stakes are sky high, with President Trump himself warning that the U.S. would respond with overwhelming military force if a final deal doesn't come together.
Which leaves us staring down this massive, looming question. Will this peace actually hold past the next 60 days? We're looking at a framework that has successfully paused a devastating conflict? Sure, but it is simultaneously being hammered by domestic outrage in the U.S., active military defiance in Lebanon, and a deep, lingering distrust from Tehran. So, can this initial agreement survive all of that pressure? Or are we literally just 60 days away from returning to the brink of a global catastrophe? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on that clock and never stop seeking to understand the facts behind the headlines.